Hi, my name is Rachel. I chose to talk about CSS box models in our presentations, and so that's what I'm going to talk about is the box model and how it works and what exactly it is and stuff like that. So this is just an image to start out with of what a box model is. You've got your content or the elements that are inside, the padding, the border, and then the margin on top. And we're going to go into what each of these do and what they are and how to write them all out and stuff like that. So it's going to be really interesting. So the content is going to be this first square right here. So this is text, images, links, anything that's going to be in a start or an end tag. So, I mean, it really could be anything. This could even be like divs or sections. Anything within a start and an end tag is the content, is what's going to be in that very center box right here. Then we have our padding. So the first thing that I want to say about padding is it's actually an invisible element, meaning that you can't actually see the padding. All it's going to look like is a white space around your element. So for instance, paragraphs, you don't want to necessarily have a paragraph that is right on top of a heading, because that doesn't look good. You do want a little bit of space between the two. So that's what padding is. It makes sure that nothing is crammed up against each other. So we write out our padding with the word padding, colon, and then however much you want the padding to be, with a semicolon at the end. So this is the shorthand way of writing it. However, if you're wanting the padding to be different on all sides, there's a way to do that as well. All you have to do is write padding, and let's say you want the top to be 20, but you want the right side to be 15, you want the bottom to be 10, and you want the left side to be 5. You're going to write in the same format, padding, colon, 20, space, 15, space, 10, space, 5, space, with that semicolon at the end as well. You can also write just the top padding. If you want the top padding to be just that 20, then you can say padding dash top, and then write however much you want that to be. This is just the shorthand version. This will make sure that all of the padding is the same size on all the sides. All right, so the border is going to be what goes around the padding. So if you look at the way that this box model is set out, you see that there's a space between the border and the padding. This is literally going to show up like a white space around out on the inside of the border, and then you're going to have your content in the middle. So our borders are written out like border width, border style, and then border color. So this is written out in that same layout. We've got border, so we're naming our element. And then we've got the width, we want it to be 4 pixels wide. And then this is the style that we're choosing to have. This is a dashed orange line, so this is the color. You want to make sure that you specify it so that you have what you want. You can change the style to pretty much anything you want. There's dashed, there's solid, there's 2 lines if you want to do it that way. The world is your oyster. You can choose any sort of border that you want. And then you can also specify the color. If you're not sure that you want just a straight orange border, maybe you want something a little lighter, a little darker, you want more of like burnt orange, you can actually specify that using a hexadecimal code, and you can put that in instead of just the color orange, which is really nice. All right. Now, lastly, we have our margins. Now, margins actually work the same way as the padding does. It is also a transparent feature, meaning you can't see around it, and it makes sure that nothing is butting too far up against each other. So for instance, my margins right here are actually uneven. So this would have been like the equivalent of me like making the margins different on each side. And you can actually do that. This is the shorthand version, but just like the padding, you can specify margin left, I want 20 pixels. Or you can do all of them a different size. So you can still put margin and then with a space in between them, make them all a different size. Now remember, again, it's going to go from the top and go clockwise. So you want to make sure that your margin on top is the first one you have written down. Your margin on the side is the second one you have written down. Your margin on the bottom, the third. The left, the fourth. All right. And then I have a really good definition for the margin. So I'm going to read that to you guys really quick. The last part, the margin, is the portion of an element that exists outside the element. A margin creates space between the targeted element and surrounding elements. So I just thought that was a really good definition, better than I could say it for sure. So this is an example of all of it written out. So it's a little bit out of order, but I'm going to talk about it anyways, because you don't have to write it in the order that it's written on the CSS box model. So the div is our element that we're selecting. So this div is our content. That's what's in the very middle. That's everything that we're selecting. And we actually made our div a specific width. It's going to be 300 pixels wide. Now this is kind of nice because if you only specify the width, it's going to scale the height to the right so that it's not like disproportionate or anything. So our div is this very center deep red that we're looking at. And then our padding is next. That's this salmon on the side. So we actually decided to do shorthand of the padding. So 25 pixels. We want 25 pixels to separate between our content and whatever comes next, so the border. We want there to be a space there. Now remember, you can always write it all the way out, like if I want the top to be different than the bottom or the left to be different than the right, that's always possible with the padding. But you don't have to. This is actually a lot easier to do and normally looks a little bit nicer, I think. So that's why I wrote it like that. Then we've got our border. This little light pink piece right here. Our border, we decided, was going to be 25, so that's the size. The type is going to be solid, so we just want a solid border all the way around. And then it's going to be green. Remember, these two different things, there's a lot of different kinds of borders, so make sure that you're putting the kind that you want. Or you can always play around with them and see, like, do I want a solid border? Do I want a dashed border? What kind of border do I want? And do I want it to be green, or do I want it to be a more yellowy green? Or you can always play around with this, but this is how it needs to be written out. And then we have our margin. Now remember, this is between the elements. It exists outside the element and creates space between the surrounding elements, basically. So we're going to put 25 in between. We don't want anything to be touching. That just looks bad. So we're going to set a margin. Now remember, the padding and the margin are both invisible elements, meaning you're not going to see, oh, like in this picture, you're not going to see, oh, this has a margin and this has padding. You're going to be able to tell that it's there because it won't look so cramped together, but it's not a visual element. It's transparent. So that is actually what the CSS box model is. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for listening.